Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. As always, my name is Joy, and in today's video I have a special guest. This is my longtime friend Pauline.
Hey.
Pauline and I met in 2012, 2013.
I think it was about that time, yes.
Yeah, we met around that time. We connected. We were actually cool. You know, we lost touch over the years, but we recently reconnected. I do feel it was a divine connection.
Yes.
So I'm excited to have Pauline with me here today. She is going to be one of the first of our Girl Chat videos. And as always, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit that notification button. That way you can be notified when I do post new videos. And as always, welcome! So in today's video, we are going to be talking about suicide. Pauline actually had a younger sister who committed suicide, and this is something that affects our community. This is something that affects our young girls, our young boys, you know, older men, older women, young ladies, young men. So we want to definitely talk about it, bring awareness, and I really hope that this video will touch somebody and bring awareness to somebody. And as always, if you do have questions, definitely leave them below, and Pauline and I will be more than glad to answer them for you. So Pauline, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about Michelle. Tell us a little bit about Michelle. Who was Michelle?
So I come from a family of 5. Michelle was our little sister. It's really hard to say was, because it's still kind of like is, right?
Yeah.
So I come from a family of 5, and Michelle was number 5. She came 11 years after me, so she's that last born who has like
Beloved child.
Yes, who has like 5 parents or 4 parents, because pretty much we all raised her, right? And so so Michelle was our baby, the last born of the family. If you can think of it, it's anything she wanted, right? The baby gets. And so so she was our little baby.
Tell us about Michelle's personality. What type of person is Michelle?
So we, like I said, family of 5, 4 girls, 1 boy. Michelle being the last born, she had a knowing of herself. Like she marched to the beat of her own drum. We always joked that she can take rags from your couch and like turn them into an outfit and like boldly walk outside. So she was very bold. She was really intuitive, loved kids, just like magnated towards kids, kabisa. And she also she knew herself. Like she was very aware. She was very aware, and she was not necessarily a pleaser, but she cared. So she was really good at reading a room. I think mostly because she grew up the last born, so she grew up with my mom a lot, and a lot of my mom's friends, and just that age where she's not an only child, but is almost raised like an only child. She was very intuitive. She would come in, read a room. She would know how to talk to the oldest person and also to the little kid and the in-between. And so she was very sensitive towards that and things like that. And just a ball of joy. I always say, even after she passed, I got to mourn a sister, but I really also got to mourn a friend.
Wow.
Because she was one of those people, if she wasn't my sister, we definitely would have been friends.
Aww.
She was very mischievous, she's those people who you're in a grocery store and she's like, you know, she always spots out the odd thing that is happening, or, you know, the latest news, you'll call her up and she'll like well, and so she was, but she was also just a lot of fun to be around. Like her personality was, she's one of those people you can hang out with all day and just have a lot of fun with. And so, yeah.
Wow, she sounds like such an amazing person.
Yeah.
I got to meet her. I remember my memory of Michelle was when we went to VA. You and I drove down to a VA.
Okay, yeah.
To I think it was to a conference or something. But later on, we came into the room and we were all doing like chapatis and.
Oh, yeah.
I think
about that.
that was the one time that I met her, but she wasn't talkative. I think she was still a little bit young at the time. Yeah. But that was always my last memory of Michelle was the chapatis, you know. And chapati, it's a bread. It's a Kenyan bread that we eat with tea or just about anything. So we were splitting this chapati, and that's my last memory of her. But what happened, Pauline? What happened?
So Michelle was it was her 21st birthday, and my mom called me when she got home from work, and she told me she got home and Michelle had hung herself. That's how she committed suicide. And so pretty much that's like the big picture of it, right? But yeah, it all is kind of like this big blur that I don't think to this day, like I get bits and pieces of it still, but it's still like memories of it pop up, but it was all just very blank, when it happens to you, it's like it happens and you know it happened, but you can't piece it together, and then life is still moving on. But yeah, it was her 21st birthday. We had probably I had spoken to her on Friday, so this happened on a Sunday. So we spoke on Friday. I was coming home that following weekend. She lives in Texas and I lived in Florida. So I was coming home that weekend, and we were going to have a bridal shower. And so she was putting together this bridal shower with two of the friends of ours. And so that week before, we'd been communicating a lot. She was buying the plates and this and ordering the cake and just putting together this big thing. So that Friday was the last time we spoke. Good spirits. I think we talked for like 30 minutes. I helped her to set up her tuition payments for the next semester of school. So she was excited about that. But yeah, so Monday my mom calls me and tells me, she just got home and she's found Michelle, and so the chaos began from there. And I think I hung up the phone, and I just didn't want to, I said, no one call me if it's not good news. If you have bad news, don't call my phone. So I ignored everyone's call from that point on. But later my now husband came. I called him up and I told him what was going on, and he came home and he's like, no, she didn't make it. And so yeah, so that was it was her 21st birthday, and she hung herself.
Wow. So, what could have caused her to hang herself, to take her life?
Well, I don't know. You don't know with these things, right? So that I think is the first question that everybody asks. Mm-hmm. Why, right? You have this. She had a very bubbly personality, and there was not a sign, right? It's not anything we talked about. It's not. There wasn't a conversation about it. There wasn't I feel sad. That during the summer she came to visit me twice. She came to visit Jacksonville twice. My sister and I both live here, and so she watches the dogs, and so she would come, and our summer together, we took a road trip out to Charleston. No sign, right? So I don't know if there's an answer as to necessarily why. I do know that, spiritually, right, we live in a world that, of course, because of sin, like the devil is there, right? And so the devil is there to kill, steal, and destroy. So for me, that was the first clarity that I had to understand when it came to suicide. Mm-hmm. Was this is not something that is of God, right? Mm-hmm. the devil is just there to steal. Like, he is the stealer of souls. Like, that is his main job. If he can do that, he has succeeded. And so, for me, that would be the answer to that, because there's never really a why, right? It's, yeah.
Okay. And when you said the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy, that actually made me think of a message that my pastor preached today. And he said, a lot of times we will say, how could God let this happen? You know, where is God when this is happening, right? And I wish I had wrote down the scripture, but I'll make sure I leave the scripture below. He said, sin entered into the world when the first man, Adam, took a bite of that fruit, right? When sin entered into the world, it entered through the serpent, who is the devil, right? Adam and Eve, they lived this perfect world where they were shielded by God, where they had everything they wanted. They were in the land of milk and honey, right? But God told them, do not eat of that fruit, right? And they ate of that fruit. And when they ate of that fruit, it's not that God abandoned them, but they allowed sin. They allowed the devil to be able to come into their lives. And not saying that every single person who, gets sick or maybe commits suicide is because they allowed the devil, but I do believe maybe it has to do with that sin coming into our lives, and us maybe not spiritually being, because it says, if you want to be faithful, if you want to know the word of God, you have to continue to meditate on it. You have day and night, you have to meditate the word, right? And when we step away from the word of God and we stray, sometimes it's much easier for the devil to attack us, and for that sin to be able to come and manipulate us, tell us you're not worthy, you're not beautiful enough, you're not smart enough, and what are you doing? Your family doesn't even love you. You don't even fit in, right? Your friends don't even like you. Things like that. And you start to question yourself because you've forgotten of who you are, who God made you to be, right? The devil has come in, and he has come in to kill, steal, and destroy. And I can piggyback on that and say, once we do say, God, maybe I've strayed, maybe I've lost my way. Jesus says, I came into your life so that you might have life, and not just have life, so that you might have it more abundantly, right? So I think that would be my take on that. And it's funny because, like I told you a little bit earlier today, as I was listening to his message, I didn't even connect the two until you said what you said a little bit earlier. And I was like, wow, okay. Let me move on to the next question. So how do you and your family handle such a loss? How do you move forward?
It's a good question. So one thing I've come to learn is forward is that's a big word, right? Like, when you're living life, you kind of day by day go. But when something like this happens, first of all, there's no manual, right? It happens, and you know that it's happened, but it completely leaves you shattered. I describe it a lot as your spirit man. It's almost like the pain is so deep. It's like your spirit feels it. Like your spirit cries. Like, I cry, but like the pain is from within. It's something. I don't even know if anybody can ever, like, you can describe it to anybody unless they've gone through such a thing, right? But one of the things I found out early on is I'm plugged into my church very heavily, and one of the things that we did was grief counseling. So grief counseling or grief therapy, there's different names for it, right? But you need somebody to be able to shepherd you through this. This is a season in life that you cannot walk by yourself, right? Like, isolation is the enemy of anything. And a lot of times, even with suicide, you're when you're in isolation, you're fighting these battles, and it's so dark, and the darkness just seems even darker than it actually is. And so with death, with pain, the first thing you want to do is pull back. And one of the things which I'm really glad we did was grief therapy. And so that's how you begin to deal with this, because there's no roadmap. There's nothing that covers it, and you need to. I never knew that grief was a thing, right? Like, you hear people say, "Oh, you need to grieve, you need to," but I never knew it was an actual thing, like an actual journey that looks very different every day. And you need a shepherd. You need someone who, first of all, is experienced with this, and just even though it's from, even if it's a psychologist or just somebody who has dealt with this kind of thing that can shepherd you through this. And especially if someone who is spiritually rooted too, that they can, because it's a bumpy road. It's very raw. It's very rough, and a lot of times when you think you've walked it, it slaps you again, and you're like, oh. You feel like it's day one all over again. Wow. So a big way we've done it with our family, and everybody is doing it differently, right? But one big thing we've done is grief therapy, which has been really good, because with grief you have to walk through it healthily, and if you don't, there's just like with everything in life, if you don't deal with something in a healthy manner, then you end up in very fragmented spaces, right? And so you have to have somebody walk you through the anger, right? Because there's a lot of anger. Because unlike if she was involved in a car accident, we have a reason. We know, okay, she was driving and she got in a car wreck. So we have something to put it on. When someone takes their life, there's so much anger. There's so many different emotions that you go through, because you feel like they left you by choice. And so you need someone to help you navigate through that. Number one, have an understanding of what suicide is, right? Have a good, healthy, and also a good spiritual understanding of what suicide is, right? What mental health is. So if anybody is even going through something like this, number one, do not isolate yourself, and you cannot fix it by yourself. It's not, and your friends are great, but your friends can't help you fix it. Your spouse is great, but he can't help you fix it, right? You have to go to, if you break a bone, and you shatter it, you need an orthopedic surgeon to come in and be able to know which bone to put back, right? As good as your mom is, they can't bandage it up for you, right? You need someone who look at x-rays and understand what the bone break looks like. You need someone to tell you to keep the weight off. You need someone to monitor your growth. You need someone to, it's not a 2-month process. It's not a year process. It's just a whenever your heart is healing and needs to be healed process. And there's so many distraction and distractive things that come with that you have to be able to identify those things and cut them off. Because like I said, the devil, the enemy of your soul, right? That's what I call him, the enemy of your soul. The enemy of your soul is not done working. Like he didn't stop at Michelle. Like his job is not done. He's still out there. The more they can get, the merrier, right? The more he can, if he can snatch Michelle, he can snatch me. He can snatch my other students. Like his job is not done, right? And so you have to be aware of that, and you have to equip yourself and be able to find find the correct tools to now navigate this life that you don't know how to. You need to understand what is normal and what is not, and what is destructive and what is not. And so a big thing for our family has been grief therapy. And for me, the grief counseling has been really important because it's almost been like a roadmap. There are days that, a good example, like when I was dealing with a lot of anger, or when I was going through an angry phase, where I was just really mad at her. I was like, really, like, this is what you did, and you did this on your birthday, and mom is broken, and and it's like, so that anger, he was able to help me navigate through some of that, and be like, okay, well, this is how you need to be processing this. This is a very normal thing, but this is a good way to process anger, and this is not a good way to process anger, and so things like that. So grief counseling I really recommend, right? Just staying rooted to God, because one of the worst things is when you lose somebody. I remember I asked God, I said, like, wasn't she worth fighting for? Like, you are God, you talk to the sun and the you are God, like, why wasn't she enough for you to save? And I remember it was probably 2 weeks ago, I was at her grave in Corpus Christi, and it's always been really hard for me to go to her gravesite, because I know she's gone, but then I don't, in my head sometimes I feel like, well, maybe she'll just come back sometime, but I was at her, so her grave makes it more real for me, so I don't like going there. But I was at her grave site, and my mom goes there. When I visit my mom, she goes there a lot. And it was such clarity. God was like, I fought for her. I did. Wow. And the events leading up to the day that she committed suicide just had so much love around her.
Wow. And
so staying spiritually rooted helps you get some of those answers, because you're like, this is something that can really put that hinge in you, like that can draw you apart. And so, grief counseling is staying, just you don't stop your faith with God. You don't stop going to church, because that day that you missed, there's a message in there that could have helped bridge another gap, right? You find roots. You find people that still check on you, that hold you accountable, that if I don't answer your call, you are coming to my house, or you have people that check you, and you find resources that help you within that. And also just being careful not to go too far off to the left, because again, like, we still have to understand, like, the devil he never sleeps, right? And the same resources that God uses, the devil has he has the same access to things like that, right? So being very cautious, because I had to, like, I joined a lot of groups, looking for healing, looking for solutions, looking for things, and I realized that some of the things I was joining and some of the groups I was joining were actually deterring my healing. I was becoming captive to this thought of suicide, and I just kept thinking everyone around me was just gonna kill themselves. I would get in a fight with my husband, and I'm like, okay, today is the day,
Wow.
And you would read all these statistics about who commits suicide and things like that. So just being very careful about what resources you tap into, and how you let that because again, like I said, the devil is just, as hard as we're working, he's working twice as hard, right? And we have to be vigilant to that. Like, we cannot, the day we are asleep on the wheel one day is more than enough for him to come and just stir up some more, right? And he doesn't need a lot. He just needs a finger, right? Because he knows if he can have a finger, he can have two, he can have the whole hand. He doesn't need to tell you too many lies. He just needs one lie, right? He just needs to tell you that, you know what, you're not worthy to. Like, you have nothing to live for.
Exactly.
Like, what is there to, your favorite sister's gone. Like all he needs is that. He just needs one lie. And if you can put one lie, you can put another one, right? And if you can doubt, then you can pull away. And so just finding your prayer warriors, finding your, and constantly, it's not a one day thing. It never goes away. It's an everyday thing. For the rest, it's almost for the rest of your life. You're just fighting every day. Every day is another day that you're in battle, and that you are just digging in there, and you're going and yes. So grief counseling, staying rooted where you are, and just finding your community, like your community of warriors that you surround yourself with, your community of friends, that your roots that still will faithfully keep praying for you, faithfully keep checking in on you, because it's a journey.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
They tell me that, right? So when I started grief counseling, they told me there's a day that I will go through the grief.
Okay.
And when I go through the grief, it's no longer gonna be the pain of the loss, but I'll start to remember the good times we had and embrace those. Now, I am not anywhere close to that, and but I believe, like I do. There are days that the pain is there, and I'm like, God. But I do believe that there is a day that that I will remember her in a happy memory. Like it won't be all tears. And another thing is, another reason I say that is because there's something I learned, right? With when you have a loved one that passes, you have a lot of firsts. You have a lot of, this is something that you did with them that now you're no longer doing. And there's nothing as worst as those firsts, right? Mm-hmm. So like last year, Easter, my little sister was in Jacksonville, right? And she went wedding dress shopping with me, right? Mm-hmm. So for Easter, she was here, and that whole, it lined up a little bit with her spring break and something like that. So she came early, and we really just had a blast. We went out to Savannah, we did this. So when Easter comes around, I remember where I was, and that she's not there to experience this with me. I can't even call her up. That's a first, right? And those firsts are always so hard. And you experience them all the time, right? You have Christmas. Oh, last Christmas I had her. This Christmas I don't. So those firsts are always so hard. And the reason I know there's a light at the end of the tunnel is when I go through those firsts a second time, it hurts, but not as much. Mm. It hurts, but it's not as bad as it was the first time. The first time is raw. Mm. Then the second time, it's still raw. And sometimes when I've gone through those first, the third time, I'm like, okay. So like when I went home and she wasn't there, terrible. When I went home and she still wasn't there, horrible. But when I went home and we cleaned her room and we moved around her stuff and then it wasn't as bad as it was the first time, which is how I know that healing is coming and healing will be there, right? And so you just go through the first. And the worst thing about the first is you can be a year into it, right? And that first hits you then. And so those firsts are always so difficult. But they tell me there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and so it's an everyday thing.
I would definitely agree. I would agree. You have to go through the process, and I've mentioned, you've probably seen my videos as well, where I went through such a hard heartbreak. 7 years in a relationship, a canceled marriage. It was hard, and quite honestly, I felt the same thing. How could a perfect God let this happen? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? And there is, And the one scripture that stayed in my heart was, though he slay me, yet will I trust him.
Yes.
It's in Job. though he slay me, yet will I trust him. You know? And I was like, yeah, the devil came in and he destroyed. And today I don't feel good. Today I feel like crap. And though I'm going through this, I'm going to continue to trust God because I know there is light at the end of the tunnel. Right? 2 years later, you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel. There's happiness, there's joy, there's peace. Right? And you look back, you know, and you're like, wow, I've come such a long way. You know, and wow, I've changed so much. Right? You start looking at things in a different view. So I would agree with you. I would agree with you. I can't even compare the two situations, right? But just going through that, there is light at the end of the tunnel. That's the one thing that I would say to you.
Amen.
To encourage you. And, you know, keep trusting. Keep believing.
Oh, yes. You have to. You have to.
You have to.
You have to.
You do.
You have to.
If you had one thing to say to somebody who was contemplating suicide, what would you say?
So that's a really good question. They always say, and I've heard this term before, but it's different when you go through it. But they always say suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody is going through a lot of things. Number one, like I said, the devil wants you to be in isolation and remind you that you are alone. So even if you're going through something, his first mode is to tell you, you know what, no one will ever understand. Mm-hmm. If you're going through anxiety, if you're going through depression, if you're going through any of that, his first tool for you is to let you know, is to keep you in isolation. He doesn't want you to, you know, don't talk to too many people. Somebody might give you some encouraging advice. You are in this alone. You actually don't belong to this world, you know. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I would say is talk to someone. Like if you're contemplating suicide, if you're find someone you can talk to and not just not maybe a friend that would co-sign with the negative feelings. You find that one person that you know that if I tell this person, they'll actually this person is different. I know they'll take a different step, and that's usually one of the people that's the most that's the one that you're like, I definitely don't want to talk to this person out about this, right? So number one, find someone. Say something. Michelle was very loved. At her funeral, that's what everybody kept saying. We loved her so much. She was so loved. So how could someone who is so loved feel so alone, right? Like, how could they have all this love around them and yet feel so alone and isolated? Again, that's what the devil wants. That's, even if you're dealing with depression, talk to somebody about it. Talk to anybody. That's the least. Just voice it out. Don't bury yourself in it and try to fix it, because a lot of times you can't fix the mud that we're in, right? And when we're in the mud, we can't see clearly. So talk to somebody. Just say anything to anyone who loves you. If you have a church community, plug into that. If you don't have a church community, find, if you are in college, find a resource, right? Just anyone to talk to. Just go through those thoughts with them. Say, this is what I'm kind of thinking. Or just talk about it. Say it out loud. There's a difference in sometimes when you say it out loud. When it's in your thoughts, we fight so many things with our thoughts. Sometimes even in life, you can have a whole argument with yourself in your head, and you can make a case for it. And so sometimes we can be very dangerous, And so don't do that. Don't keep yourself in. Talk to somebody. talk to somebody, because you just might realize there's someone else going through what you're going through. You are needed in this world. I mean, the Bible says that, like, I knew you. You know, I know every year. You're here for a purpose. It's not an accident. God didn't fall asleep one day and then you showed up. You know, you're on purpose. You are on purpose and have a purpose. And so when you do that, and even if it's just your purpose is for one person, you have a purpose, right? And suicide eliminates that. You know, suicide takes you out of your purpose, takes you out of, you know, a lot of you are gifted in arts, and like Michelle was a great cook. We always say that she can make anybody love broccoli, right? Like she just had a hand in the kitchen. She'd take 3 spices and like she'll make a meal and you'll be like, whoa. She could cook like crazy. She could bake like crazy. And she used that a lot. Like all her high school friends tell you how many of her cupcakes they ate. And that was a gift. That was a gift that she had. You know, sometimes I can't take onions and turn them into something. You know, like you could give me 5-star ingredients and I won't even necessarily do it like that, right? And so a lot of you have gifts. And the devil wants to minimize that and, you know, so yeah, you know what, that doesn't even, it doesn't matter. So what you make people laugh, it doesn't matter. So what you do this, it doesn't matter. So don't stay in isolation. Just talk to anybody, talk to somebody. You're here on purpose. Like you are not an accident at all. You are here for a purpose and on purpose. And God said, I have plans to help you prosper, to, you know, to bless you increasingly and abundantly, you know. And if you need help, it's okay. Like mental health is not, sometimes we think, you know, let's just write that off. No, if you do need the help, yes, go get it. It is fine. If you need to sit down with a doctor, that is okay too. Like it is not a bad cliche. So don't stay in isolation. Talk to somebody, tell somebody, write a letter to somebody, tweet somebody, whatever it takes. Just don't stay alone, because the more you are alone, the darker it gets. The darker it gets, the more despair it gets, and the deeper it gets, and you don't want to be there, because we were not created for that. We're created to be in community. We're created to be with each other. Your whatever God has put in you is so important that you had to be born. It is that important. Like, there's so many people who just never make it to see 5, 10, 20, but you have, because what was put in you is so important. And so it's not an accident. Maybe you haven't found what that is, but it doesn't mean it's not there. So don't stay in isolation. Talk to somebody. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. I felt that.
Yeah.
Because quite honestly, I think a lot of times we're ashamed. We're like, I don't want people to think of me as less than, or I don't want them to know that I'm actually having these thoughts. And it's just refreshing to just hear you say, you need to talk to somebody, you know. And not just anybody. You want to talk to that one friend that you know, if I tell them, they're going to get my life all the way together, right? So this last question, I'm actually not going to ask you.
Okay.
The last question was going to be, if you had something, one final word to say to Michelle, what would it be? But I'm not going to ask you that question. And this is why. Because I know her spirit lives on, right? And because I would encourage you to talk to her every day. You know, I would encourage you to continue communicating with her, as though she was still here, right? So I'm not going to ask that question, just because I want you to continue. If you feel like you want to say something to her, just say it. You know, she might not respond, but I just felt that peace not to ask that question. So, what would you like to say? What are your final words?
I think we said a lot today, right? And so, just stay prayed up. Find roots, we were created by a creator, right? We were created who loves us so, he loves us so much, even in spite of the bad things that happen, because bad things will happen. Like, it's life, there's sin, we have free will, we'll fall short. But just find yourself some roots, find you a place to be anchored and to stay anchored, because this world is tough.
It is.
It's so tough, and you can't do it alone. And so don't try. We weren't meant to do life alone, right? And it does get better. It does. I remember my 20s. My 20s were rough. And I remember telling Michelle this a lot. I was like, regardless of anything, like, we can get... I remember having those conversations a lot with her. I was like, no. Like, we can get through anything. Like, I was teaching her how to drive, and she was really, like, a little bit anxious about being on the road, and will I get it? And I remember telling her, like, you'll get it. Like, it's not only will you get it, but you'll get it, and you'll be so good that you'll wonder if there was a time that you couldn't drive. Like, it's gonna feel that second nature, right? And so that's kind of how life is. Like, there's that anxiety at first, where even when you first start driving, like, you're going and you never even let go of the wheel, right? Like, both hands are always there. You pay attention. You hear stories about people falling asleep on the wheel, and you're like, how do people do that? I am so alert that I don't. And then you probably start driving, and you're like, man, now you can eat your French fries and, like, drive and comb your hair.
On.
Yeah. and those are things that when you started driving, you couldn't do.
Exactly.
And so, and that's because, you've built up that
confidence.
Yeah, that confidence, that memory in driving. You've built it up, and it's become stronger and stronger. And that's how life is. And that's how life with God is. It gets stronger. It gets easier. Yes, if you're driving, you'll see an accident. It won't stop you from driving, right? When you're 95 and you see an accident, you don't stop driving the next day just because it's an accident. You just know that that's life. You're like, okay, the cars do crash, and it doesn't mean that I won't get into one. So that's how life is. Like, it's still, but life with God is like that. Like, it's just, you know that He has you, and you know that even if crashes are happening around, that it doesn't mean that He's left. It probably wasn't someone paying attention. It's just part of how things go. So stay anchored, stay encouraged. Like, it gets tough. It's gonna get tough, and it's probably gonna get tougher, but it also gets better. Like, it does. And you just you stick through all of it, because it builds you, and it builds a stronger you that's better equipped to handle what God is bringing your way. And so that's it.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Love you, sis.
Oh, love you so much. Thank you so much. If you are battling with thoughts of suicide, if you are battling with depression, mental health, I do have a few phone numbers for you here. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, it is available 24/7. That number is 1-800-273-8255. And if you are in Jacksonville, Florida, you can reach out to this number, which is 800-799-4889. I'm going to have both of these numbers down in the description box. As always, if you do have any questions, you have any comments, definitely leave them below. Go ahead and email them to me. If it's questions for myself or Pauline, we'll definitely make sure that we respond. But as always, thank you so much for watching. God loves you. We love you.
Yes.
Have a wonderful day.